Thank you. So, how do people look? How do people watch? If you hand people a brochure, where would they start reading? In some cases it's easy to know, in some cases you don't know. Last year some of your college students designed a rather complex brochure for a jewelry shop, a brochure that you could open up and pull things out, and actually in order to find out where do people start to look, they made a mock-up of the brochure, so a physical thing like this, where you could open it up and put things and pull things out, and they asked several people to take it and to start reading, to find out where people start reading. It's not that obvious. So I'm going to, at least for website, give you some ideas about how people look in our culture. I'm talking about the culture like us, like North America, like Europe, where most people start reading from top to bottom and from left to right. This is already something we know, right? So, how do people start to? Well, in Western cultures, we read from left to right, from top to bottom. And people look where they expect to find things. So we already know now, if people expect to find a name or a logo, in most cases you start looking at the top left. And how do we actually find out how people look? Well, we can use a technique called eye tracking. Eye tracking, what does it mean? Eye tracking means that you can use a little camera. For instance, in my laptop there could be a little camera, most of the time in the middle underneath of the screen, and this camera could have an infrared sensitivity, which means that there is some kind of light that we wouldn't bother about, and the camera could find out exactly where I'm looking at the screen. In fact, the camera, the infrared camera that's now available, can spot precisely to about 1 square centimeter where I'm looking at the screen. So on this screen it would be the size of this. So the camera could find out at which of these words I'm looking. Right? And if we are using this, we can use 2 types of information. The first type of information is where do people look most? Which part of the screen gets most attention by people? Where are most people looking? And we call this a heat map. So this is an example of a heat map. And the red means this is where people look longest and look most. So you can see at this part of the newspaper, actually at this part of the newspaper, most people read at the top. And especially at the top left, but also a little bit at the top right. And you can also see that nobody ever looks here. So if you want to sell advertisement space in a newspaper, nobody who's clever enough will buy an advertisement here, because nobody will ever look. So it's a waste of money. Okay? This is where people look in a normal page of a newspaper. Unless you do extra tricks. So we need to know some extra tricks. But this is more or less. So this is another example of heat maps. And this is a heat map where there are lots of entries. It's kind of a table of content. And you can see what happens if people look at the table of content. They again scan from left to right, from top to bottom. And especially the top left corner gets most attention. So this is the most expensive part of your newspaper or of your website or of your advertisement, right? And there's a second type of information, and this is in which sequence do people move. People start looking and then they move. So it makes sense to understand in which sequence do people move. And this is most of the time the viewing pattern. People start somewhere to the left, they look around, and then they go, and then at the end they go most of the time to the top right. If you don't do anything special, this is how people scan. How people scan a page, how people scan a brochure, how people scan a poster, how people scan a website page. Okay? So this is a combination. On the top you see a page of the Times, a newspaper, and at the bottom you see the sequence. People start here, 1, 2, 3, 5, and then and at the end they in a way go to this part here, globally speaking. If you don't do too much, this is the sequence. So you know where people would end up eventually, and you know where would people start. So we know the upper left corner is the preferred starting point. If there's something very important for people to find out, it's on the top left corner. Headlines, branding, the logo, the name could go there. After this, people start to scan. They go from left to right and they end up at the top right most of the time. So you can see this is, very globally speaking, what happens over time. People start in the red part, then they go to take the yellow part, and then in the end, if they are still there, they go to the green part. I'm saying if they are still there, because if in the red part there's something that makes people act, makes people click, makes people turn the page, makes people run away, they will never see the yellow part. If people continue in the yellow part and there's something interesting that makes them act could be click a button, run away, put a coin in the box, then they will never go to the green part. Yeah? So even here, if people are starting here and hear something they want to buy, then they put a coin and never see there's other stuff. Okay? So, and people are very quick readers. Most people only look at a couple of words, 2 or 3 words. So, if the first few words are not very interesting, they will not continue reading a sentence. So, for instance, if in a table of content there is an entry saying, this chapter is about, people are gone. And nobody will ever find out what the chapter is about. If the chapter starts with color, movement, then people might be interested. But if you have this chapter is about the use of color, nobody will read about color anymore. Right? So, look here. Here you can see in the heat map how many words people scan. And you can see the first word is frequently read, the first 3 words, but hardly anybody ever reads as far as here. Yeah? So choose your words. Try to pick the best word to start with. People only read about 5 headlines in a homepage or in a brochure or in a newspaper. If there's 20 entries, nobody will read all 20. People read about 5, independent of the number of entries there are. Let me show you a statistic. Here you can see. This is the total number of headlines. So if there are 5 headlines, people will read about 4. If there are 15 headlines, people will read about 5. So don't bother to have an endless list of headlines. The only thing that happens is you are not sure which ones people read. If you provide people with 5 or 6 headlines, you have a good chance they read them all. Yeah? So, you have about 5 chances to attract attention. Okay? Attention may be drawn. We can do things that make people change their behavior. If you want people to look at a certain spot, to take a certain action, you are able to draw the attention and to change the view pattern. You can actually manipulate how people read and what people see and what people do.